My name is Camilla Alvis. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought I had a simple, stable marriage. Not perfect, but stable. I stayed home. I raised our son, Alex. I cooked, cleaned, managed the bills. My husband, Steve, went to work every day as a regional sales director for some logistics company. One of those jobs that sounded important, but mostly just meant long hours and client dinners. We weren't flashy. We didn't take tropical vacations or throw big parties. But we had a rhythm. We had our home, our routines, and what I thought was a quiet understanding of love. Until the rhythm cracked. And my son was the one who noticed it first. It started subtly, as these things always do. Steve came home later and later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. He said he had work trips, overnights, meetings that ran late. The company had new expectations, he explained, and he needed to stay competitive to keep up with the younger guys. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for over 20 years. He'd never given me a real reason to doubt him, until the day he packed a bag, a real suitcase. Not a work briefcase, not a gym bag, but a suitcase. I've been assigned a long-term project, he said. There's a corporate dorm at the edge of the city. It's temporary, just a few months. I blinked. A dorm? He nodded. Shared with a few other managers. It'll save on commute and expenses. But what about home? He gave me a tight smile. We'll be fine. We'll still see each other on weekends. I didn't argue. Maybe I should have. He left that night with a firm hug and a kiss on the forehead. Something that felt more like a father sending his daughter off to camp than a husband saying goodbye to his wife. The house was too quiet after that. Alex was away at university then, halfway across the country. It was just me, the ticking of the kitchen clock, and the hum of Steve's absence. I tried not to overthink it. Tried to believe the dorm story. But something in my gut whispered otherwise. Still, I did what I always did. I waited. I cooked his favorite meals on weekends he promised to visit. And I slept on one side of the bed, leaving his pillow untouched. Then Alex called. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just sat down with a bowl of soup when the phone rang. Hey, Mom. His voice sounded cautious. I smiled anyway. Hey, baby, everything okay? He hesitated. Where's Dad? I blinked. What do you mean? I texted him earlier, asked if he could help me connect with someone for a summer internship. He said he was out of town, again. My chest tightened. He's been working a lot, I said slowly. He has some long-term assignment, company dorm near the city. There was a pause. Then Alex said something that stopped my heart. Mom, that's a lie. I froze. What are you talking about? I came home last weekend. I didn't tell you because I had a job fair in the city. Thought I'd surprise you after, but I saw Dad. Where? He inhaled. Downtown, near the theater district. He was with a woman. My grip tightened on the phone. A coworker? Alex's voice dropped. They were holding hands, Mom. My vision blurred. Alex continued. They went into a restaurant. It looked intimate. I waited outside. An hour later, they came out laughing. She kissed him. I couldn't breathe. I followed them, he said quietly, to an apartment complex. They went inside, together. The silence between us stretched. I didn't want to believe it, Alex whispered. I waited until morning. They left the building together, like it was routine, like he'd done it before. I felt my stomach twist. I'm sorry, Mom, but you deserve to know. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Thank you for telling me. I hung up the phone, sat in the dark, let the soup go cold, and stared at the empty chair across from me, the one Steve used to sit in, reading the paper, pretending life was fine. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop, searched his name, his company. Nothing obvious. Then I checked our shared calendar, the one we barely used anymore. Nothing about meetings, no out-of-town entries, no birthdays or anniversaries, just blank space. I clicked into his email, the one I still had access to. Found receipts, dinner reservations, flower deliveries, digital hotel keys, but never for our address. It hit me like a wave. Steve wasn't staying in a dorm. He wasn't sacrificing for work. He was living another life, with someone else, and he had lied to me for months, maybe longer. The next morning, I did the one thing I never imagined doing in our marriage. I called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Lena Torres. A quiet, focused woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She listened as I explained what Alex had seen. She didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally and scribbled notes. You have two options, she said when I finished. We can initiate a discreet investigation, or we can confront him now, with what little we know. I stared down at the cup of untouched coffee she'd offered me. I want the truth first, I said, all of it. She nodded again. I'll refer you to someone I trust. The investigator's name was Henry, retired cop, liked to talk about his garden, said tomatoes were the only thing more honest than people. He was good. Within 5 days, he had photos. Steve and a woman. Younger, blonde, fashionable. I hated that I noticed she was attractive. They were at the same apartment building Alex had described. Henry said Steve had been staying there 3 nights a week. Sometimes more. He even had a key fob. They shared groceries, ran errands together, kissed in public like teenagers. Her name was Claire. She worked in marketing. No husband, no kids. Just a man who belonged to someone else. I sat with the photos spread out on the kitchen table. The same table where Steve and I used to play Scrabble, where Alex once spilled cranberry juice and cried like he'd destroyed the world. Now all I saw were printed snapshots of betrayal. Alex called that evening. I talked to Grandpa, he said. He's furious. About what? He said, this isn't the man who raised him. That Dad used to admire your strength. Now he's hiding from it. I let out a shaky laugh. I'm not sure I ever knew the real him. You did? Alex said. He's just not that man anymore. We didn't tell Steve what we knew. Not yet. Instead, I started making moves. I opened a separate bank account. I went through every drawer in the house, scanning documents, photocopying statements, checking balances. Steve had taken out a small loan, in his name only. He'd stopped contributing to our retirement plan 5 months earlier. He was building a back door, trying to exit our life while keeping the assets. The worst part? He'd used my Social Security number to co-sign on a luxury car, one I'd never seen. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, strategic, cruel. I wasn't just being replaced, I was being erased. I called Lena again. I want to move forward, I said. She didn't hesitate. We'll start with asset protection. 2 days later, Steve showed up at the house unannounced. I hadn't seen him in 3 weeks. He walked in like nothing was wrong, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, opened the fridge, complained we were out of orange juice. Didn't realize you still remembered the address, I said calmly. He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? I turned and handed him an envelope. Inside, copies of the photos, financial records, Claire's name and address. He paled. What is this? Proof, I said, of everything you thought I'd never find. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I don't want to hear it. He stepped back. Camilla. No, you don't get to say my name like that anymore. He sat down slowly. Said it wasn't serious. Said Claire meant nothing. Said he was confused. Then said he was in love. I didn't react. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just looked at him and said, you need to leave. Tonight. He tried to guilt me. Tried to play the victim. Tried to remind me of the years we'd shared. But when I didn't budge, his mask cracked. He got angry. He called me cold. Said I was always distant. That I never appreciated him. That I pushed him away. I let him rant. Then I stood up and said, you are lucky I'm not dragging your name through every courtroom in this state. He blinked. I've protected you longer than I should have, I added. But now, I'm done. He left with a single duffel bag. Didn't even say goodbye. Just slammed the door. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something unexpected. Relief. After Steve left, the house was quieter than ever. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet that haunted me before. It wasn't full of confusion or suspicion. The silence felt clean, like fresh air after a storm, like a space finally cleared of lies. Alex came home the following weekend. When I opened the door and saw him on the porch with his duffel bag, I broke down crying, not out of sadness, but because I hadn't realized just how much I'd been holding up by myself. He wrapped his arms around me like I was the one who needed protecting now. And maybe I was, just for a little while. We spent that weekend watching old movies, baking banana bread, and talking, really talking, for the first time in months. He told me he was proud of me. I told him I didn't feel proud, just tired. You should be proud, he said. You faced it. You didn't crumble. You didn't pretend it wasn't happening. I nodded, but I wasn't quite ready to believe him yet. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Steve didn't fight. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe he realized he'd lost the game he thought he was so clever at playing. He tried once, just once, to negotiate for the house. I didn't even respond. Lena handled everything. I kept the house, the retirement savings, the car, and my dignity. Word got around, as it always does. I didn't share details, but people asked, and I told them what they deserved to know. That Steve had chosen someone else, that he'd lied, and that I wasn't the woman who would sit in silence while her life was stolen from under her. A few weeks later, I got a call from Steve's father. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Camilla, he said, voice gravelly, I want you to know, we don't condone what Steve did. I appreciate that. You were always good to this family, always put up with more than you should have. My wife and I, we're embarrassed. You don't need to be. He made his choices. He paused. He's not doing so well. I raised an eyebrow. Really? He and Claire broke up. She emptied his account and left, said he was too clingy. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. And now? He's staying with a friend, barely working, drinking too much. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. But a small part of me felt satisfied. Not because he was miserable, but because the universe had balance again. I focused on myself after that. I picked up a part-time job at a floral shop. Something peaceful. Something that smelled better than motor oil and betrayal. I joined a walking group at the park. Started journaling. Began reading books I'd always meant to get to. Little by little, I started remembering who I was before I became Steve's wife. And I liked her. One afternoon, while rearranging a bouquet, I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned. It was Ted, my old neighbor from 3 streets over. Widowed, kind, quiet. He smiled. Still the best roses in town? I laughed. Only if you're lucky. He bought a bouquet, then came back the next week. And the next? We started having lunch together. Then dinner. Then long evening walks that felt like softness wrapped in conversation. He never asked about Steve, but I told him anyway. And he listened, without judgment, without pity. Just presence. He said one sentence that stayed with me for days. You don't look broken, Camilla. You look reborn. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Spring came in soft this year. The sun warmed the porch in long golden strips, and my garden, yes, my own little garden, began to bloom in full color. Lavender, tomatoes, basil, all growing under my care with no one second-guessing how I did it. Alex visited often. Sometimes he helped me prune the plants. Sometimes he just sat on the steps and talked about life. He was thriving, working in a city he loved, dating someone kind, and most importantly, he was proud of me. I tell people about you, he said one morning as we drank iced tea on the porch, about how you built yourself again, stronger. I smiled. I didn't build myself to impress anyone, I said. I know, he replied. That's why it's impressive. Steve never tried to come back. And that I was grateful for. He drifted into the background of my life like a bad memory that no longer had the power to ruin my day. I heard he bounced between jobs, that he tried dating again but no one stayed, that he sold his fancy car, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town. I didn't wish him harm. But I didn't owe him hope either. Ted, on the other hand, stayed. He didn't rush, didn't push, just kept showing up, bringing fresh bread, recommending new music, fixing the squeaky gate when I wasn't looking. He made me laugh, belly laughs I hadn't felt in years. He reminded me that love didn't have to feel like performance. It could be kind, quiet, safe. One night, as we stood outside under a sky full of stars, he reached for my hand. Do you think, he asked, there's such a thing as second love being better than first? I looked at him, at the gentle way he waited for my answer, and I said, I think sometimes it's the first real one. I never needed a grand comeback. No viral moment, no public takedown. Just peace. My home, my name, my voice. The ability to say yes when I wanted to. And no when I meant it. I look in the mirror now and see someone I wish I'd met sooner. Not because she's perfect, but because she's whole. Because she stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing herself. This story didn't begin with love. It began with a lie, but it ends with truth. The truth that women like me, like us, can lose everything we thought we needed and still come out full of life. We bend, yes, but we do not break. So here I am, Camilla Alves, mother, survivor, and more than enough. Always have been, always will be.